Welcome to 2024, and here is a brand new list of pros and cons of living in Kansas City in 2024. Stick around until the end of the video, and I'm going to chime in with how our lives have definitely changed due to these pros and cons in Kansas City in 2024. The first pro is that it is still cheap to live here in Kansas City in 2024. With inflation affecting everybody in the last few years, you'll be happy to know that it is still affordable to live here. You're going to save on most things if you move here to Kansas City from other parts of the country. You're going to save on food. You're going to save on transportation. You're probably going to save on healthcare. Of course, your healthcare needs may vary. You're definitely going to save on goods and services. And the best part is that the median house price point is $287,000. So if you're looking to buy a home in Kansas City, it is still affordable for you to do so. Now that $287,000 is the median price point in the entirety of the Kansas City metro. So depending on where you're looking in different parts of the metro, those houses may vary in terms of price point. If you're looking somewhere like Kansas City, Kansas, or the inner city in Kansas City, Missouri, you're likely going to be able to find something for much cheaper than that. However, if you're looking for something really nice in like Overland Park, Liberty, Johnson County in general, you're most likely going to pay a lot more than that. But that is still way down from the median price point house in America, which is $412,000. So you can see by moving to Kansas City, there's a lot of affordability that you can definitely unlock by simply moving here to Kansas City. Now, speaking of savings, there is one thing that has gone up universally for most Kansas Cityans in this last year, and that is utilities. So that leads us to our first con. One of the cons that has not changed about Kansas City in general in 2024 is the utilities and the infrastructure. It is still pretty lacking, but here's what's new for 2024. Evergy, which is the electricity provider for a lot of people here in the Kansas City metro, has really hiked up their rates. Not only that, but they changed us to a time-based plan, so if you use more electricity during peak hours, you're going to get charged more. And I know for a lot of people, they were really upset about Evergy switching over to a time-based plan. I personally don't think it's the worst, especially if you read through their plans on their websites. I think you can actually save a little bit of money with Evergy. But Evergy's customer service really does kind of suck. When we moved from Southern California, I know that Southern California Edison definitely had better service than that. So if you're moving from an area where your electricity company is actually really on top of things, I would say that Evergy right now in Kansas City is not necessarily the best. Also, it is well known that the water infrastructure here is also not the best, and so it is super inefficient. We pay on average $100 a month for our water bill. It kind of really sucks. That's a lot of money to pay for our water bill, and we don't do excessive things. All we do is, shower, use water for cooking, cleaning, those types of things, very normal family things. During the spring, my wife does water the plants, and so I know water bill is going to go up over $100 then, but still, even our regular water bill is about $100 per month here in Kansas City. Now, that water bill is high, but that is wrapped up with trash pickup. But let me tell you about trash pickup. Now, this is very pertinent to just Kansas City, Missouri, where we live, but there are no garbage bins. They don't provide any garbage bins. They recently provided us with a recycle bin that we can keep stuff in, but we have a lot more garbage than we do recycle. We have babies in diapers right now. We have a lot of food garbage and all that kind of stuff that we can't throw in a recycle bin. And so guess what you're supposed to do? You're supposed to leave those garbage bags just out there on the curb. We have insane, crazy squirrels in our neighborhood that will chew through those garbage bags to get those morsels of food inside those garbage bags. And guess what? When those garbage men come and they decide to throw in those bags in the trash, a lot of times those garbage bags will break and get all over the ground out in front of your street here in Kansas City. Super annoying. And then also is that with our recycle, we have these nice bins, and that's great, but guess what? It hasn't been picked up in 7 days. Right now, it is a pretty cold time here in Kansas City. There is snow on the ground, but you know what? They picked up our garbage, but not our recycling. It doesn't necessarily make sense. It's not super regular. Speaking of other infrastructure and utility things, our mail hasn't been delivered in 7 days.
Is that for real?
It's very much a Kansas City, Missouri thing. We didn't have these things happen when we lived in a different suburb in Kansas City in Gladstone. So I'm just not sure if it's just location specific. But when I call my clients down in Johnson County that have moved to Johnson County, they don't necessarily have those same issues either. When you move to Kansas City, Missouri specifically, and this video is about the entire KC Metro, but when you move to Kansas City, Missouri specifically, just expect a lot of these things to happen. It's very strange, very perplexing, and very annoying. Insurance has definitely gone up here in Kansas City because there have been a lot of people making different insurance claims here in Kansas City. I know that from my insurance broker. He says insurance, just expect it to be expensive, and this could be nationwide, but again, the broker that I work with is Kansas City specific, and he says just expect your plans to be going up here in 2024 because there have been a lot of claims and new roofs because of hail, other natural disasters, and all of those things that have happened, not necessarily in Kansas City, but outside of Kansas City. And so the insurance companies in Kansas City also have to raise your rates as well in order to compensate for their losses. Now, speaking of housing, I am a real estate agent here in Kansas City, so if you're thinking about moving to Kansas City, please give us a call, 816-4-MOVE-KC. We are a team of licensed real estate agents that are ready to help you make a move here to Kansas City in 2024 and beyond. So whether you're 9 days out or 90 days out, we would love to help you. Now, I'm done rambling and complaining about the utilities here in Kansas City. So that leads us to the second pro, and that it is a great place for young families. And in 2024, I only see that getting better for young families. When we originally moved here, we didn't necessarily see that many young families around in Kansas City. But nowadays, when we go out, when we go to different areas in Kansas City, we see more and more young families with young kids. So if you're a young family moving to Kansas City, that is one thing that you're going to want to know, is that this is an increasingly awesome place for young families in Kansas City. The statistics show that Kansas City is a relatively young city. There are a lot of people here 35 and under. I'm 35 right now, and so I'm part of that population. And it is an awesome place to raise your kids, especially if you want that cost of living that I spoke about before. A lot of young families are moving here because of that cheaper cost of living. They can dedicate more time home with their kids instead of out there working trying to make ends meet. And that is definitely true for our family. Such a slower pace of life for families to just be able to spend time with their kids here in Kansas City. There are also a plethora of awesome things that your kids can do if you decide to move here to Kansas City. Our favorite is Science City because of the age of my sons and because of the proximity that we're located to Science City. My kids are 4 and 2 right now. So Science City in Union Station is an awesome place for kids that age to visit. However, we also love the Kansas City Zoo. That's an awesome zoo, and they have a brand new aquarium that opened late 2023 that you should definitely check out. They've got some awesome exhibits, and while it is a little bit smaller than I would like, again, I grew up on the coast, and so we had like Long Beach Aquarium, Monterey Bay Aquarium that we frequented. But this one in Kansas City, for it being right smack dab in the middle of the country, I actually think is pretty good. Speaking of aquariums, Sea Life in Kansas City is still going strong. That's over by the Crown Center next to Legoland. That's an awesome place for you to take your kids to visit if you like sea life. They also have some nice large exhibits that I think you're going to enjoy if you're a parent who has a kid that's fascinated with the ocean. Speaking of Legoland, next to Sea Life is Legoland. We've taken our kids to the Lego exhibit in Union Station, but at 4 and 2, they're getting to the age where we can trust them to not put Legos in their mouth. And so this year we will be making our first family trip to Legoland. So look out for footage of our family visiting Legoland for the first time this year. That's going to be on our list. Not only that, but if you're thinking about moving to the Kansas side in Overland Park, there is the Deanna Rose Children's Farmstead. That is a fantastic place for kids if they want to grow and explore farm animals and all that types of stuff. The only negative about that is that right now in the bitter cold, you cannot necessarily go there. Another place that is very similar to Science City in Union Station is Wonderscope. Wonderscope is a great place for young kids. I would say if you have kids up to 10, they're going to love Wonderscope. It's very similar to Union Station, a tad bit more expensive than Union Station, and for our location, a little bit farther, so we don't necessarily go there as much, but we definitely have been there at least 5 or 6 times during the time that we've lived here in Kansas City, and every time our kids have a great time at Wonderscope. Not only that, but Kansas City has some fantastic parks. You're going to love the parks here in Kansas City if you have young families. We go all of the time. Granted, the weather has to permit, and so we will get to a con a little bit later, but the parks definitely are a must visit here in Kansas City. The last thing that our family increasingly likes to do is the different sports activities here in Kansas City. I'm talking about professional sports here. You've got the Chiefs, who are right now in the playoffs and actually doing pretty well. You've got the Royals, our MLB team. And while they're not doing well, it's rumored that they're going to get a new stadium, which stay tuned for new developments here in Kansas City in 2024. But you know what? Going to a ball game with your young kids in their current stadium is a blast. We love it. We do it at least 3 or 4 times a season. One of the things that you may not know about Kansas City is that there are actually a lot of collegiate sports around here. We have gone to a UMKC soccer game, and we are going to a UMKC basketball game, men's basketball game, and that's a college right 5 minutes from where we live here in Kansas City. And that's a fun thing and a cheap thing for you to do with your kids if you decide to move here to Kansas City. But speaking of sports, it's really hard to enjoy sports without going outside. So that leads us to our next con, and that is the weather. You know, the Chiefs just played the fourth coldest game in NFL history here in Kansas City a few weekends ago. Depending on when you're watching this, they may have already been eliminated from the playoffs or won the Super Bowl. Tell me from the future exactly what happened. But the Chiefs just played the fourth coldest playoff game in NFL history. It has been extremely cold here. It has been a brutal winter here in Kansas City, and it's been a little bit longer for extremely cold weather than it usually typically is here. The summers here are wonderful, but they are humid. So if you're not used to humidity, Kansas City does have pretty humid summers. But I think the winters are definitely the worst. I may be talking from recency bias because right now it's still actually pretty cold. These are a few 30-degree days, and we're actually breathing in relief here because it has been in the negatives for at least 5 days here. So let me show you what living in the negatives for so long can actually do to your home here in Kansas City should you decide to buy a home, or even if you should decide to rent. So come and follow me. Let me show you. All right, let me show you a few quirks about living in a Kansas City house when it gets really, really cold. Of course, our house is 100 years old, and so that may not be necessarily true of the house that you choose to live in if you decide to move to Kansas City. But as we come down here into our basement, one of the things that I have to do, it is so cold down here, even right now, it's only 30 degrees outside, but one of the things I have to do is I have to keep this space heater right here where my pipes come in, where all the water comes in, so that this won't freeze, because if I don't do this, then it's going to freeze. Now, one thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to locate where your pipes kind of run here, but our pipes, as you can see, kind of go up through here. This is the pipe that supplies water to our upstairs bathroom. I know it's supposed to be blue, but the people who did this before us made it red, unfortunately. So this pipe goes all the way up. Now let me take you upstairs and show you what froze. So now we are right above where that pipe runs up my external wall. And what I had to do was I had to find this pipe, and I couldn't really locate it, so I kind of just measured and estimated, and I drilled a small hole through here in order to put this space heater to prevent this pipe from freezing, because it did freeze up before. And if you come from a place where pipes don't necessarily freeze, one of the dangers when your pipes do freeze is that they could burst, and then water could get everywhere when they unfreeze. So that is one of the quirks about living in an older Kansas City home. If you get something newer, you buy something newer, that may not happen to you, but for us it has happened. The past 2 years that we've lived in this old home, we love this home, we don't want to move, but that's one quirk that you're going to want to deal with if you move to Kansas City. And so that story isn't necessarily just pertinent to me. I've had client after client after client call me in here in Kansas City, kind of worried that their heater wasn't working because they could not get their home to heat above 65 degrees. And that is very common here. If you're going to live in the negatives in terms of weather for that long, it is very common for a lot of heating systems here to just not be able to keep up with the weather here in Kansas City. And we kind of experience the same thing. When it gets in the negatives and stays in the negatives for that long, our thermostat just cannot keep up, and we just have to bundle up because it's going to be about 60 degrees here inside the house, and that again is going to put your pipes in danger of freezing. So that is one huge negative of living here in Kansas City. However, owning a home here in Kansas City is still more of a pro than a con because of the growing property values here in the Kansas City metro. A lot of people were talking about how fast the market was growing and how fast property values was increasing back in 2021, 2022, and 2023. But 2024 is shaking out to be no different. Early 2024, one of my clients and I decided to go in to put a bid on a house. We put in a bid that was slightly over asking price, and I definitely thought that we were going to get it there. But at the last moment, somebody came in $15,000 over our asking price and outbid us. That's still happening here in Kansas City. While we were disappointed, we kind of talked and said, look, it would be imprudent for you to necessarily put that much money over the asking price for this house, especially when no other houses in this neighborhood are selling for this much. And so he said, look, I think that's wise counsel. We should move on. We eventually found him a house that he really likes, and we're under contract with that house now. However, you don't necessarily want to ignore the sign of that in Kansas City home values. If you own a Kansas City home right now, it looks like 2024 is still going to be a year where your home value continues to increase. With the amount of growth here that we're going to talk about here in a little bit, and the amount of young families that are still going to want to be coming here, I would say that Kansas City is poised to weather any type of housing recession that could come. So that's a huge pro for you in Kansas City in 2024. Now, speaking of housing and living and all of that type of stuff, you're going to want to be extremely careful where you pick to buy a house in Kansas City in 2024 if you do, or where you pick to move, because one of the next cons is the education level, especially here in Kansas City, Missouri proper. Now, you can completely ignore this if you're living in Johnson County or if you're living in certain parts of North Kansas City. If you don't know any of these areas, again, give us a call. We'd be more than happy to talk to you about these areas. But if you live in Kansas City, Missouri proper, like I do, especially south of the river, a lot of the schools here are not up to par. A worrisome statistic that I found on the internet is that in Kansas City public schools, only 20% of elementary students tested at or above the proficient level of reading, and 12% tested at or above that level for math. So that is really low statistics for our Kansas City public school district. And while they are working really, really hard to get that better, they just regained accreditation last year. There have been a lot of times in the history of Kansas City where they gained accreditation and then they lose accreditation. And not only that, the teachers in these public schools are really dissatisfied. Because of that, we live in an area where we have either two choices. If we don't want to send our kids to public school, we have to either shell out a lot of money to send them to a private school here in the area. And where we live, the private schools around here are very, very expensive. Or we can homeschool. And so that's what we've decided to do. We've decided to homeschool because of the level of literacy and math in Kansas City public schools. Now, if you live in Johnson County or if you live north of the river, it's typically not necessarily going to be as bad. Even if you live in Lee Summit in a different part of Jackson County, the schools there are much, much better. However, if you live inside the city, inside Kansas City, Missouri, then one of the things that you're going to get is a little bit more crime, which we're going to talk about soon, and a really poor school district. However, if you do live in KCMO proper, you will get those negatives, but you will also get a ton of growth and expansion, which leads us to our next pro, is that the metro area, especially downtown and the surrounding metro areas, are all expanding and growing at a pretty rapid rate. Kansas City is projected to grow by 400,000 people by 2040. That's a lot of new people coming here each and every year. And if we're not talking about commercial entertainment stuff, there are a bunch of new builds basically all over the KC Metro. Wherever you go, you're able to find a new build. Our house is 100 years old, and even in our neighborhood, which a lot of our houses are kind of the same age, even in our neighborhood, we can go down the street and find a brand new construction home out there. Pretty crazy. Pretty awesome if you ask me, but also pretty crazy. There are new builds happening everywhere here in Kansas City, and it's really in vogue to take an old neighborhood like this and put a bunch of new builds here and kind of revitalize it. So we're praying and hoping that happens in our neighborhood. That is awesome, not only for property values in Kansas City, but that is awesome for you if you're looking to move here to Kansas City, because there are a ton of opportunities to live in a brand new house. Not only that, we have a lot of new commercial and industrial developments as well. We have a brand new airport that opened this last year. It's a really sweet new airport. I got to check it out right before it opened, and we have traveled through there a few times now, and it is super smooth. We love that new airport. It is really awesome, and it really brings Kansas City to be a kind of cutting edge modern city, especially if it's your first impression of our city. You walk into this brand spanking shiny new airport that has a lot of Kansas City art and Kansas City stuff in there. It's a really awesome place to be. Our old airport, while it was super convenient and super small, it really felt like a small town airport. Now, when you go into that Kansas City International Airport, you kind of feel like Kansas City has arrived. So that is awesome. There's a brand new urban park in Kansas City right smack dab in the middle of downtown called Penway Point. There's a huge Ferris wheel down there. You really can't miss it. It's an awesome area to go and visit. It's an awesome area to take your kids, especially if they like to play mini golf. That's going to be open, Brent, right here in 2024. Right now, the Ferris wheel is currently open as I record this. Also, speaking about downtown urban developments, there's the South Loop project, which is going to be smack dab in the middle of downtown. They're going to build a park on top of a freeway. That's going to be super cool. They're still fundraising for that right now, but it sounds like that is moving forward full steam ahead. So Kansas City is booming, and that is awesome. Obviously, with that positive, there's always going to be a negative, and the negative about that is that the transportation around here is kind of clogged up, and with all the new construction, it's getting a little bit worse. The roads here in Kansas City are still pretty rough in 2024. My bumper almost came off after I hit a pothole once. So if you move here, you're going to want to watch out for those potholes. Slow down, go around them if you can. Don't hit them head on because they will mess up your car. They will mess up your tires. We just had to get 4 brand new tires because the roads here are so tough on our poor little van out here in Kansas City. Now that doesn't even account for all the detours that you have to go through because of all the new construction, because of the things happening downtown. It is hard to get almost anywhere in Kansas City without hitting a road that they're doing repaving on, or without hitting a complete shutdown because they're trying to put in the new cable car downtown Kansas City to Midtown. All of those things are nice, but the price that you have to pay is that there's going to be a lot of construction here in Kansas City in 2024 and beyond. And so that makes it pretty tough to get around. They're trying to improve that. They're trying to put millions of dollars into the cable car connecting downtown to Midtown, but that's still a ways away. They're still trying to build that. That's not here yet. So if you want to get around Kansas City, bring your car or come here with enough funds to buy a car. Now, speaking of a car, you're going to need the funds to buy that. And that leads us to our last pro, and that is there are plenty of jobs here in Kansas City in 2024 still. Interestingly enough, Kansas City was voted the best place to work remotely. And that is because there is a lot of jobs here in Kansas City that allow remote work here in 2024. Also, there's a lot of things to do while you work remotely here in 2024. If you don't want to work remotely, or if your company doesn't allow you to work remotely, there's still Cerner, which is a huge healthcare provider here in Kansas City. They're headquartered here. Hallmark, the greeting cards and all that kind of stuff. I have 2 friends that are engineers at the Hallmark company. There's a ton of engineering jobs just available here in Kansas City, with Burns and McDonald being another one that one of my friends works for. And that's not to mention all the brand new jobs that open because of these new developments that I already mentioned. I have a client moving here right now from Los Angeles because he is going to work at this brand new airport at a really nice job that he got, and they're going to relocate him from Los Angeles, and he's going to buy a house here in Kansas City. So that is a very common story that I'm hearing, that these companies are hiring. I know DeSoto's opening this brand new battery plant. I know that Google just bought 500 acres in the Northland in Kansas City in order to build on it. I know that Facebook's technology center is coming here as well. So there are a ton of new jobs, surprisingly, in tech. So Kansas City is not just a farmland. There's a lot of things to do. There's a lot of places to work, depending on your skill and your variations. When my wife was trying to find a job here, we were trying to move here from Los Angeles. It only took her about 2 months to find a job. Now, for you, that may be a long time. For us, that wasn't necessarily that long of a time to look. She applied to a few, got a few interviews, and actually got 2 job offers. We picked the one that was better for our family, and we moved here to Kansas City. That is a common story for a lot of people who are moving here. So if you're deciding to move here in Kansas City, depending on your skill set, you will probably have a job here in Kansas City. Now, unfortunately, with all the positives about jobs, the last negative that I'm going to talk about on this video is the crime here in Kansas City. Remember, stick around to the very end, and I'm going to chime in with how much our lives have changed in Kansas City in 2024 and how this list has kind of affected us. So crime in Kansas City, it was the deadliest year. 2023 was the deadliest year on record in terms of homicides here in Kansas City. It is a really, really sad reality for living here in Kansas City. And unfortunately, only 126 of the 181 homicides were actually solved. So that means there's 50 some people out there that are murderers that are still free. That's really sad. Our police is understaffed. A lot of places saw violent crime decrease after the pandemic. Unfortunately, in Kansas City, we saw violent crime increase. And so all of those things are really, really sad realities here in Kansas City. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be the case for you. You're going to want to find the right place for you and your family, because living in the inner city may not necessarily be for you. You're going to want to check out these other areas where crime statistics are a lot lower if you don't necessarily want to deal with these things. You stuck around to the end of the video. I'm going to give you 3 ways that our lives are changing because of this list. The first way is that because it is such a great place for families, we are welcoming new baby boy, God willing, here in May. This has been a fantastic place to raise our family, and we love living here in Kansas City. It is a fantastic place where we get to homeschool. We get to spend a lot of time with friends and family. We get to spend a lot of time with our church that we love. And my wife gets to be home to homeschool the children. We couldn't ask for anything more in this life. God has richly blessed us here in Kansas City, and we love it here. The second way that our life is changing is that we are going to get our conceal and carry license just because of the prevalent crime that is here in Kansas City and just around where we live. Only a few weeks ago, there was a shooting right behind our house. And while the person who was targeted did not die and did not even get hit by a bullet, he was telling us that it was his disgruntled cousin, and they started fighting, and his cousin started shooting at him. It was about midnight. We heard the bangs go off. It seemed really close, and sure enough, it was right outside our house. It's unfortunate, so we've decided, hey, we're going to go get educated about what it's like to responsibly own a handgun and responsibly protect our family and all of those things. So that is one way that the increased crime has kind of changed our family here in Kansas City. Last thing is kind of humorous, kind of not, but because of the severe winter here in Kansas City, and because these energy bills have kind of raised their prices over the time, we have received our highest, crazy high, our highest gas bill to date. And we do have a gas fireplace that we run all the time, especially when it gets cold, and it's still a little bit cheaper than keeping the electricity running the whole time, but it's really expensive. It was $342.77 just our gas bill here in Kansas City. So those are 3 ways that our lives are changing here in Kansas City in 2024.